actually now go do the function. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Now, there are two hormones right here. The reason that they're in red is because they're inhibitory hormone, meaning they inhibit the anterior pituitary to release something. Before I get into the, I forgot to write this one. So let's, I'll come back to this. I forgot to do this last slide with you guys. PRH. Prolactin releasing hormone, PRH. PRH stimulates the anterior pituitary to release prolactin. Yes. Prolactin releasing hormone. So PRH, prolactin releasing hormone, will travel to the anterior pituitary, stimulate it to release prolactin. Now prolactin will travel to the breast. Okay? That's all I'm getting into detail. Now, coming back to the inhibitory hormones, okay? As you can see, these 5 hormones stimulate the anterior pituitary to release something else in turn. There are 2 inhibitory hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus. So these 5 are stimulatory, releasing hormones, okay? Majority of them end with a RH, or all of them do. So if you anytime see a hormone which ends with a RH or releasing hormone, you should know that hormone is secreted by the hypothalamus. Okay? I mean, there are exceptions, but that's the classical rule. Anytime you see a hormone that ends with SH, okay? I mean, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but a SH stimulating hormone is released by the anterior pituitary. Okay? Now, ACTH does not fall in that classic rule. There are always exceptions to the rule. So if you get confused, if you see FSH and if you see CRH, if you need to know which one is released by what hormone, if it falls in that classic rule, then you're safe. Only the tricky ones, the exceptions, you have to memorize. Okay? Now, there are 2 inhibitory hormones which are released by the hypothalamus. The other 5 were stimulatory. One, which I can't write this way, but it's going to be this way. It's called somatostatin. Somatostatin. Okay, so somatostatin is written this way. Okay, so somatostatin. Okay. Now, somatostatin is an inhibitory hormone released by the hypothalamus. That hormone will travel to the anterior pituitary. It will actually inhibit the anterior pituitary. So somatostatin, when it's released, it travels to the anterior pituitary. And it will stop the anterior pituitary to release its hormone in turn. It will inhibit the release of growth hormone. Does that make sense? Yes? It does not stop, it doesn't inhibit LH or FSH to be secreted, not TSH, only growth hormone. This is why this line is close to here. Okay? Does that make sense? So somatostatin is released by the hypothalamus. It will inhibit the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. Okay? Now, the second one is dopamine. Now, dopamine can act as a neurotransmitter or as a hormone depending on what secretes it. Okay? When it's secreted by the endocrine system, it's a hormone. So when dopamine is secreted by the hypothalamus, it actually goes and inhibits the anterior pituitary to release prolactin. Okay? Does that make sense? So, dopamine, when it's released by the hypothalamus, it will travel to the anterior pituitary. It will inhibit the anterior pituitary to release prolactin. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. I'm not going into detail what is the function of cortisol, aldosterone. You guys know something like that. Okay. But make sure you know this, okay? As I said, for my test, anytime when you do endocrinology, everything comes back to this chart. I'm just saying, anytime a hormone ends with RH, I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule. But the classic rule is if it ends with the RH, that hormone is released by the hypothalamus. If it ends with the SH, the classic rule is it's released by the anterior pituitary, but there's always an exception to the rule. Now we're going to talk about the pancreas. We have one pancreas, okay? We only have one pancreas, and the pancreas is retroperitoneal. Okay, right now just write retroperitoneal. When we talk about the digestive system, I'll get more in detail. Okay? Retroperitoneal. R-E-T-R-O, retroperitoneal. P-E-R-I-T-E-N-O-E-L, peritoneal. Okay? So it means it's behind the peritoneum. Retroperitoneal means that organ is behind the peritoneum. And I'll explain what the peritoneum is when we talk about the digestive system. Now, here is the pancreas. Okay? This is the pancreas. Now, the pancreas has two distinct areas. It has an endocrine part and it has an exocrine part. The exocrine part is for digestion. Okay? So we talk about that when we talk about the digestive system. So we forget the exocrine part right now. The only part we're focusing on today is the endocrine part. So as you can see, this whole thing is a pancreas. It has these blue areas, which is the endocrine part, and the endocrine part is called islets of Langerhans. Called islets of Langerhans. That's written right here, islets of Langerhans. So the endocrine part of the pancreas is called islets of Langerhans. Now, so this portion of the pancreas is enlarged. Right here is the exocrine part, and right in the middle is the endocrine part. This entire thing is the endocrine part of the pancreas, which is called islets of Langerhans. Okay? So endocrine and the exocrine part are interspread. You say endocrine, endocrine, endocrine between the exocrine part. Okay? Now, the endocrine part of the pancreas has three distinct cells. It has alpha cells, beta cells, and delta cells. Alpha, beta, and delta cells. Alpha cells secrete a hormone called glucagon. Beta cells secrete a hormone called insulin. Delta cells secrete a hormone called somatostatin. Somatostatin. Yes, somatostatin was also released by the hypothalamus. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. So, islets of Langerhans has three cells, alpha, beta, and delta. Alpha secretes glucagon, beta secretes insulin, delta secretes somatostatin. Okay? Okay. Okay, you don't need to know this part. The only thing you need to know is somatostatin is released by the endocrine part of the pancreas, delta cells. It's also released by the hypothalamus, and it's also released by the digestive tract.
So those are three places where it's secreted.
Okay. I'm not expecting you to know the function. before I get started, it should have another dot right in the middle. Okay. I forgot to press indent. Now, how many adrenal glands do we have? 2. We have 2 adrenal glands. Location, top of kidney. So it's called suprarenal. Suprarenal. So here is a kidney, here is a kidney. On top of it, you have an adrenal gland. So that's that. Renal. R-E-N-A-L. Renal means kidney. Now, the adrenal cortex has 2 layers. It has an outer part. Okay, which is called the cortex. The outer part is cortex, and the inner part is called the medulla. So when you take adrenal cortex and when you cut it, in the cross section, you will see the inner area, which is called the medulla, the outer area, which is called the cortex. And that's important because they secrete different hormones. Okay, so the outer layer is cortex, inner layer is called medulla. Now, the cortex secretes three hormones, that's why I left spaces for 3 hormones, but because each hormone is released from a different layer of the cortex. So the cortex, when you further look into it, it has 3 different layers. Okay? So, one of the hormones that it releases is cortisol. Another hormone that it releases, the dot I wrote here, we're going to tell you what layer. Okay? Another aldosterone. And the third is sex hormones. Okay? These are the 3 hormones which are released by the cortex, because the cortex is further divided into 3 distinct layers. Cortisol is released by the layer called zona granulosa. Aldosterone is secreted by the zona fasciculata. Fasciculata, and then sex hormone zona reticularis. Okay? So the cortex has 3 distinct layers. The outermost layer. So if this is the cortex, let's say this is the cortex, correct? The first layer is zona granulosa. The second layer is zona fasciculata. And the third layer is zona reticularis. Zona granulosa release cortisol. Zona fasciculata releases aldosterone. And zona reticularis releases sex hormones. Does that make sense? Yes. Cortex. Okay? And right here, we be the medulla. Okay? So the outermost layer release cortisol. The middle layer secrete aldosterone. The innermost layer, which I'm not talking about the medulla, it's still the cortex, releases sex hormones. Okay? Yes.
The first one has zona from, I can't read the last one.
Glomerulosa.
Glomerulosa.
Glomerulosa. So zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis.
The last one is
Reticularis.
is that included in the medulla?
No, that's not part of the medulla. These 3 layers are part of the cortex. So the adrenal gland has 2 main sections. outer part is the cortex, inner part is the medulla. When you look further at the cortex, you'll see 3 distinct layers within the cortex. The outermost is basically the granulosa. Second one is fasciculata. Third one is reticularis, and after that the medulla starts.
Yeah, so the medulla is not the sex hormone.
No, the reticularis secretes sex hormones. Okay? The medulla secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epi and norepinephrine. Epinephrine, norepinephrine also act like neurotransmitters, depends what releases it. If a neuron releases it, it's a neurotransmitter. If an endocrine part releases it, they act like hormones. Okay? So the medulla releases epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay. Calcium balance. Location is your neck. So right here, okay, is the superior or the anterior portion of your neck. Okay. Now, the thyroid gland releases two main hormones. T3, T4 are classified as one category. Another one is calcitonin. Okay, you don't need to know this one. I'm not going over the functions of it. So, 2 hormones are released by the thyroid gland, 2 main classes of hormones. One is T3, T4, okay, which we already talked about. The second one is calcitonin. These T3, T4 have the same function, similar function. That's why they put together, classified. But calcitonin has a completely different function. Now, right here is a thyroid gland. Now we're going to talk about parathyroid gland. Location is posterior aspect of thyroid gland. So right here, you have a thyroid gland. On the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, these 4 little round circles, the yellow circles, are parathyroid glands. So there are 4 of them, 4 small glands. Okay. So the thyroid gland is an anterior aspect of your neck. Okay, you can't actually feel it. So when the doctors are examining right here and they tell you you're swallowed, they should not be able to feel the thyroid gland. If they do, it means it's enlarged.
So, because that one, so the thyroid is posterior or anterior?
No, thyroid is anterior and goes that way. But, so if this is my thyroid gland, here's my neck. It's like this.
Okay.
Okay, it's a butterfly-shaped organ. As you can see, it looks like a butterfly. So thyroid gland is a butterfly-like organ, and it's on the anterior aspect of my neck, like this. Now, here's the thyroid gland, here's the anterior aspect of the thyroid gland, right? Here's the posterior. On the posterior, it has 4 glands.
Okay, so that's parathyroid.
Exactly. Does that make sense? So here's my neck, it's sitting like this on my neck, okay? And so it's on the anterior aspect of my neck. Now, the parathyroid gland is on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. So right here is a thyroid gland, one thyroid gland. Right here you can see the thyroid gland. It looks like a butterfly, right? Here's the neck, and it's located on the anterior aspect. Now, when you turn the thyroid gland around, it's made up of 4 small parathyroid glands. Hormone is released is parathyroid hormone. I'm not going to get into the function. You kind of already know the function because we talked about it inside the system. Does that make sense? Yes? You can cancel the slide out. You don't have time to go over. Okay, so this is the last slide you have to know for endocrine system, and then we're done with endocrine. So basically with the endocrine, you just need to know names the location, what hormones they secreted, where does the hormone go? Does that make sense? Okay. Please, let's go to the room, take the exam, we'll come back, and then we'll finish the